Doesn't it feel good to get some things off your chest? It's time to make some noise. It's time to speak up. This is the first ever episode of Sound Off Sports. On today's episode, we're talking Wildcard weekend, and boy, does it have the storyline. Stafford returns to Motown. Cheetah faces off against Mahomes and KC. Plus, we're hearing your rants when it comes to everything college football playoff expansion. Plus, former Minnesota head coach Mike Tice joins us in studio. Let's go.
Make some noise. This is Sound Off Sports.
Well, Wildcard weekend is officially here. So exciting. It's one of the best weekends in all of professional football. And James, I mean, the way I'm breaking down these 6 games, I feel like there's 3 games that are pretty much locks, and then there's 3 games that I'm a little iffy on. But let's start here. Los Angeles and Detroit. Goff versus Stafford. This is a big showdown with a ton of storylines. I feel like it's 2 balanced rosters with a lot of talent on the rushing side of the spectrum as well as the receiving side of the spectrum. I think the big difference here is that Detroit, this is kind of feeling like their year after 3 decades of not winning a single playoff game. I feel like this is the weekend they're going to come out on top, even with Sean McVay and all that great synergy they got going on. I feel like this is Detroit's year. I think a big factor is going to be if Hutchinson can get to the quarterback and really put some pressure on Stafford. That's where I'm at in that game. Now let's move on to Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. Listen, anybody would look at this Philadelphia situation and they'd say, wow, I don't want to be a part of that. But football still comes down to scoring points, having playmakers, and having talent on the field. I think this team is surely imploding, but they should be able to do something against a Tampa Bay roster that is definitely less talented than Philly. Now, here's a game where things get iffy, James. Miami versus KC. We know they played earlier in the season, but they played in a different country, so I don't even want to talk about what happened in Germany. But we know this year it's a different Kansas City team. Usually we're talking about Mahomes and the firepower on offense. Well, if you're really looking closely at this Kansas City team, this season has all been about what's happening on the defensive side of the football. Defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo doing a great job with Chris Jones really leading the charge. To me, this is going to be about whether Miami and McDaniels can really overcome that defensive side of the football. Is Waddle, is Hill, is Mostert, is Achane, are those guys going to be healthy enough to put points on the board? We know they can do it. Sure, weather could be a factor, but I'm actually taking Miami over KC. James, I know you hate that pick.
Kansas City's my play of the week. Miami, here's the thing about Miami. They might be the most fraudulent team in the league, in my opinion. 0-4 when they're away from Miami against teams with a winning record.
Can you be fraudulent if you score 70 points? That's what I want to know. 70 points in a football game.
Yes, it's Denver, and they were at home in great weather, and that's what the point that I'm trying to get at here. 0-4 against winning teams when they're away from Miami. Lost at Buffalo week 4, lost at Philly week 7, lost versus Kansas City in Germany week 9. I know you don't want to hear it when it's across the pond.
I'm German and I don't even want to hear about that.
Lost at Baltimore week 17. And the average margin of defeat in those games, 21.5 points. So they're not just losing, they're getting beaten handily. The last thing, Miami's horrible in cold weather. They've lost their last 10 games where the kickoff temperature was below 40 degrees. Kickoff temperature Saturday in Kansas City, 5 degrees, -10 wind chill. It's going to be a tough task. Tua in games when it's below 70 degrees, 6-13.
Sure, they have a great defense. Offensively, I'm concerned. I mean, we all know the only kryptonite for Mahomes is when he's feeling the pressure and he's getting constantly hit. Anyway, let's move on. Now, the next game that I think is a shoo-in, right? Green Bay going to Dallas. Green Bay has the youngest playoff team since the 74 Bills. Congratulations to Jordan Love. It looks like he locked up that job, but Dallas is going to win that game. Now, moving on to Buffalo-Pittsburgh, another shoo-in game for me. TJ Watt was the only chance they have. No TJ Watt playing, no chance. Buffalo wins that game easy. And lastly, Cleveland going to Houston. We see the special sauce that's brewing in Houston. DeMeco Ryans probably coach of the year, I would say. you got Offensive Rookie of the Year in C.J. Stroud. This guy, the number 2 pick, is doing some remarkable stuff. I got an interesting stat for you here, James. C.J. Stroud, only QBs in league history to lead the league in pass yardage and TD to interception ratio. Tom Brady, Joe Montana, and C.J. Stroud. This guy is special. Now, a lot of people questioned him early in his draft process, right? He took this S2 cognition test. It's basically a test that just kind of tests your playmaking ability and your, comprehension of making in-game decisions. Well, he scored very poorly on this exam. He had an 18. Just to give you an example of some of the other QBs in the class, Bryce Young, first pick, he scored a 98. Will Levis, a 96. Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis, 79. So Stroud scored an 18, and, reporters asked him, what do you think about this? He said, listen, I'm not a test taker. I play football. I think Cleveland, they got a great team. Jim Schwartz has done a great job on that defense. We all know how scary Myles Garrett can be charging at you with that body and you're holding the football. But I still think if Houston is aggressive, if Stroud plays to win, not just game managed, but he plays like he did last week where that first play of the game, he's throwing a 75-yard touchdown to Nico Collins. I think they have a chance at home. I think those fans are going to be excited, and D'Amico's going to have that team ready. But let's stay on this C.J. Stroud-Houston debate. Well, David Tepper, we all saw the social video where the owner of Carolina's franchise basically tossed a drink at a Jacksonville fan in frustration. Well, sure, it's a frustrating situation in Carolina. They took Bryce Young with the first pick. They skipped over what looks like the player to be had in that draft in C.J. Stroud. Well, let's do a little background on who this David Tepper billionaire fellow is. He was fined $300,000, James, for that incident.
Brutal.
When you're a guy who has $20 billion and you're fined $300,000, what does that equate to for the average American? That's like you or me getting fined $1.77.
That's nothing, no.
Nothing. So really a slap on the wrist. But this guy has kind of had a weird history as an owner. And as we've seen this week with so many head coaches being fired, we're really seeing what it takes to be a champion in this league. And it's not just about the players on the field or the coaches who are coaching those players. It's about leadership from the top. All that stuff trickles down. Well, David Tepper grew up in Pittsburgh like you. He's a Yinzer. Is that how you say it?
It's a Yinzer.
What does that mean again?
Yinzer is just somebody who grew up in the greater Pittsburgh area.
Okay.
He is a Yinzer, Carnegie Mellon. A lot of things named after him here. Went to Pitt, yep.
Gave the largest donation ever, I think, in Carnegie Mellon history. Well, he grew up in a place called Stanton Heights. He's 66 years old. He's worth $20 billion, James. Well, this guy has got a questionable history. And I think when you're petty and you're a billionaire and you think you know everything, and then you try to lead a team to a championship, I think that's where things go wrong. This guy, just to give you an idea of some of the weirdness that this guy has been on the record about. He was once quoted in New York Magazine for having gone to a restaurant saying when a waiter is, let's say, an idiot, he didn't call it an idiot, but let's just say when a waiter is an idiot, sometimes he wishes he can just buy the restaurant and fire the waiter. Or here's another thing. He's a hedge fund guy. He used to work at Goldman Sachs. His supervisor at Goldman Sachs passed him over for a promotion. He bought that guy's $43.5 million beachfront mansion and then demolished it and bought a property 2 times and built a property 2 times larger on that. When he acquired the team from Jerry Richardson for $2.2 billion in Carolina, he was going to build a new practice facility. The city didn't hold up their end of the bargain. He destroyed a half-built practice facility. This is the kind of lunacy that's going on in Carolina. This is why a head coach should not want to take that job. And this is why there's dysfunction, and you see things like a cognition test or certain factors come into play, and franchises can't move past a certain yardstick. It's a tough thing. That's what it is. David Tepper throwing a Tepper tantrum. And I would too if I missed on CJ Stroud. Coming up, we're going to be doing a deeper dive into everything that's going on with that head coaching firing spree, because we got former head coach of Minnesota, Mike Tice, joining us in the studio. Stick around for that.
You're watching Sound Off Sports.
Welcome back to Sound Off Sports. I am here in the studio right now with the legendary Mike Tice, the former head coach in Minnesota. Mike, great to be with you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You know, Mike, I hope you don't get deja vu or get scared during Black Monday, because this is the week when all these coaches start hearing the bad news. And I think there was a former coach, Matt Rule. You might remember this guy from Carolina, Baylor. He said it's kind of like being in the mob, being a head coach. You're ultimately going to get whacked one day. You don't know when it's going to come, but it's going to come eventually. Tell us about your experience with that and what's going through the minds of these head coaches.
Well, first of all, you got to win. And if you don't win enough games and don't get in the playoffs, you got to figure you got a chance of getting whacked. Especially if you've been there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
If you are a young team and you're on the rise and you don't make the playoffs, they'll look at that, the owners, and take that into consideration. But if you've been there and you're not making the playoffs, i.e. when I worked for Lovie Smith, we went 10-6, we didn't make the playoffs. They fired Lovie Smith in Chicago.
Right.
Was that right? No, they haven't done crap since. But it's a tough day. And I've reached out to a couple friends, Ron Rivera, and it's a hard day.
You really were able to connect with players, guys like Matt Burke, the great player. He said he called you his football dad, so you were able to connect with these guys. But in today's league, guys like Mike Vrabel, a guy who, obviously, this guy can lead men, right?
Yes.
Guys like Belichick, who it's undeniable. How are they going to succeed, and what kind of teams do you think are going to want to go to them? Because there's even a narrative now where there's a lot of coaches and organizations that are going for that offensive, analytical mindset rather than just a leader of men. If you had to go one way, if you had to pick one attribute to succeed in the league as a head coach, what would that attribute be?
Leader of men. You have to be able to lead both sides of the football, and it's tough. You're an offensive guy, and then you tend to really hover around and talk with more of the offensive players. A defensive guy, you tend to spend more time with the defense. You have to lead the entire team. You have to understand special teams. You have to be a leader of men, and that is the number one attribute. Yeah. And the other thing is, you got to understand the new way of doing ball, with the analytics, and, they have big staffs now. We didn't have big staff when I was a head coach. I think we had the smallest staff. I think we had 16 coaches or less. Some of these staffs are 24, 25, 26 coaches. So
right.
It's a little bit different now, but it's still the same thing. Can't turn the football over. You got to score when you're in the red zone. You got to be able to block. You got to be able to tackle. And Chuck Knox used to say it's not that hard.
See, I think it's kind of hard. You did something super hard. You won a road playoff game in Green Bay as we're looking forward to Wildcard weekend. Tell me what the preparation is like. What's the mindset of a head coach leading into playoff weekend?
Well, we're an indoor team. We were an indoor team. And indoor teams in cold weather don't fare very well. And the percentages of victory are not very high. So that was against us. We kind of trickled into the playoffs and got in the playoffs. Nobody gave us a chance, especially outside. Our coaching staff that week did a tremendous job, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and were able to see some things when they were blitzing that we were able to utilize and use as an audible situation and throw the ball up to Randy Moss, and I think the rest is history. He had a great game. He faked the moon, and you still see that clip on TV.
How much of success as a head coach is dictated upon leadership and your owner? You were talking with Ron Rivera, who just recently got fired. I mean, let's be honest. There's a limitation on what a guy like that can succeed in Washington when your ownership, more recently now Josh Harris, but he's working with Daniel Snyder. He's got a bad ownership situation. To me, if I was a head coach and I'm auditioning for the head coaching job in Carolina, I don't really want that job. If I could get another job and I'm auditioning for that, I can get another head coaching job. Would you be that selective? Would you want to go to a bad situation? You wouldn't want to go to a bad situation, but when you're trying to get that first-time head coaching job, how much do you take into consideration ownership and things like that?
I think you have to. I think it's very, very important that you have the support of ownership. When I was the head coach at Minnesota Vikings, our owner, Red McCombs, announced he was trying to sell the football team. So we were working on a shoestring budget. Now Minnesota with the Wilfs there, everything, the big staff, the beautiful facilities, the great practice area, everything for the players. If you get that support from ownership, you feel like everybody in the building wants the same thing, and that's to win. And so I think ownership is very, very important. I don't know, going to Carolina, I'd be afraid to be the head coach and get a drink dumped on me.
And we spoke about that earlier in the show. The great Mike Tice, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I think we might start calling this Enticing with Tice.
Just let me know. I'm a hop, skip, and a jump away.
There we go, the great Mike Tice. We'll be back after a short break. Well, this is the best part of the show because this is when we hear from you, the fans, and this is where you really get to sound off. The easy way to do that, you can either email us at soundoffsports@kvvu.com or you can call us at 702-855-3502. That's 702-855-3502. Just leave us a voicemail. So the question that we wanted to be answered this week was, do you agree with the college playoffs expansion from 4 to 12 teams? There was a lot of talk this year. Of course, it was Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. And now we know this college landscape, it's going to be a lot different. No Nick Saban. We don't know what's going to be going on with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, but things are going to be a lot different, especially with the Pac-12 also folding as well. So there's going to be a lot of interesting things. But James, let's start with our first response.
Yes, so this one is from Devlor Setzer on Facebook. He says, I like the 12, makes it fair across the board. The committee is a joke, and this year proved it.
See, a lot of people have that sentiment, Devlar, and I think, listen, this is how it's going to work. So 12 teams, 6 conference champions, plus the 6 highest ranked teams that didn't win a conference championship. So I think there's going to be a lot of teams in the mix, which is a good thing. Plus, I mean, we remember everything that happened this season with Florida State. A lot of people were upset they weren't in the mix there. So now when you have 12 teams, sure, it turns a little bit more into a March Madness-y kind of thing, which is cool as well. But I think having 12 teams really puts a lot of teams into the fold. For instance, this year, if there were 12 teams, Liberty would have even been in it as well.
No, I agree that I like the expanding to 12 teams. What I don't agree with is the whole committee is a joke thing on the end of this response. When you say something like that, what do you mean? You're probably upset that Florida State did not get in over Alabama. Florida State they were not the same team without Jordan Travis. I mean, they had their chances to prove it against a 5-7 Florida team that they struggled with. Conference championship against Louisville, scored 16 points and was just not impressive. They needed style points to get in over Bama, who beat Georgia on a neutral site in the SEC title game,
right.
The team that had dominated the sport for the last 2 seasons. And I think when you take down a team and you're Alabama, the SEC champion, that is here. ACC champ, without their starting quarterback is down here. So all these people that are upset that Florida State didn't get in saying they deserved it, they did not deserve it. And it shouldn't be about who deserves it. It should be getting the 4 best teams in there.
Football's any given Sunday, and that's why I think you need to see what happens in a playoff format. Style points and how badly you beat a team, yes, that has to be taken into consideration when it comes to collegiate football, but still I think it's going to be good to have an overall expansion and get a little bit of that playoff format going. The first top 4 teams, like they currently have it, those teams would have a bye next year in the 12-team format. Let's hear what another person had to say, though, James.
So, yeah, this is from WBJJ via X. Conference champs have been left out for non-conference champs. See OSU, Bama, Georgia. Should be 10 D1 champs in the best 2, but it's going to be 5 champs and whatever 7 the committee wants. Still better than 2 SEC teams and 2 conference champs.
Yeah, so I think what W is trying to say here is it's good because you're getting those teams that win that championship, those 6 teams that get that, which is deserved, and that's a good thing. And then you're going to be able to get those teams that may not win that championship, but they're still the next 6 highest ranked teams in the country, and I think that's great. And I also think overall this is good for the sport because these bowl games, how many top players are not playing in those games because they don't want to get hurt because they have nothing to play for? So I'm done with, the Chick-fil-A Bowl or, these bowl games that mean nothing anymore, the New York Bowl or whatever they call them. It's better to just have a playoff format. I know sponsors want to make money, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, we want the best players playing on the biggest stage, and we want to be able to see what these kids can do for not only their school, but for the next level. So I think this is overall a great thing. But this is where you can get your voice heard. This is what it's all about on Sound Off Sports. Real quickly, all you have to do for our next question for next week, you can either call us, leave us a voicemail at 702-855-3502, or you can email us at soundoffsports@kvvu.com, and make sure you also check Fox 5 Las Vegas on X and on Facebook for that posted question of the week. Coming up after a short break, it's time for Sink or Swim. I'm telling you, who's really going to have to start thinking if they're sinking or swimming when it comes this weekend. We got that after a short break.
You're watching Sound Off Sports.
It's Hank from Philly, and speaking on behalf of all Eagles fans, Nick Sirianni should absolutely be fired if they lose. It's sink or swim time. The past few weeks already been unacceptable, but losing against the Buccaneers, now that would be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
That was Hank in Philadelphia, a member of our Sound Off squad. He thinks it's sink or swim time for Nick Sirianni, the head football coach in Philadelphia. Even after taking the Birds to the Super Bowl, yeah, he could be out of a job if he loses this weekend against Tampa Bay. But we want to know what you have to say. It's your time to make some noise. It's your time to sound off. All you have to do is call us at 702-855-3502. Leave a voicemail, or you can also email us at soundoffsports@kvvu.com. We'll see you next time on Sound Off Sports.